Let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we are unpacking a seriously wild, ancient tale straight out of the Mahabharata. It's a story packed with royal arrogance, deadly curses, and dark magic, and it revolves entirely around the doomed bloodline of King Parikshit and his sons.
So listen to this setup, because it's genuinely bizarre. What exactly connects a hidden pool, a slaughtered frog, and a pair of mind-reading horses? I know, right? At first glance, it sounds like we pulled three totally random items out of a fantasy hat. But as you'll see, these are the exact puzzle pieces of a dense forest mystery that ended up triggering a devastating, multi-generational curse.
To understand how things went so wrong, we have to look at our framing device. The mighty ascetic Markandeya is recounting this ancient story to the sons of Pandu. And he's not just telling it for entertainment, he's laying out this narrative to illustrate the sheer, terrifying power dynamics of the ancient world. Specifically, he wants to show them the absolute, unyielding power that the Brahmanas, the sage class, held over ruling kings.
Which brings us to Act 1, The Strange Water Pledge. Our story kicks off with King Parikshit of Ayodhya, a monarch of the Ikshwaku race, who manages to get himself completely exhausted and hopelessly lost in a dense, dark forest while out hunting deer. Suddenly, he stumbles across this beautiful singing maiden in the woods. There are no footprints. He just hears this sweet music, finds her gathering flowers, and is instantly smitten. He asks her to be his, but her response? Highly conditional. She tells him, "Give me a pledge, for then only I can be thine. Thou wilt never make me cast my eyes on water." And the king, without even a second thought, just accepts this wildly strange restriction. He marries her and hides her away in absolute privacy in his palace.
But come on, secrets like that never last, do they? The king's minister-in-chief figures out why the king is locked away and decides to pull a trick. He builds this stunning artificial forest, complete with a hidden water tank that's sweet as nectar and literally covered with a net of pearls. The king, who is exhausted and thirsty from playing in the woods, tells his new wife to cheerfully plunge into the water, but the literal second she does, she vanishes. Poof, gone. When the frantic king orders the entire tank drained, all he finds is a single frog sitting at the mouth of a hole. Heartbroken and absolutely enraged, the king blames the frogs for swallowing his wife. He decrees that anyone who wishes to see him must bring a tribute of dead frogs. And just like that, a terrible, kingdom-wide frog slaughter begins.
That horrific massacre brings us directly to the second part of Act 1, the Frog King's Curse.
So the frogs are understandably terrified. Enter the king of the frogs, a guy named Ayu, who shows up before Parikshit dressed as an ascetic. He begs the king to calm down and drops a massive twist. The maiden is actually Ayu's own daughter, Susobhana, and apparently she has a habit of deceiving kings. Ayu gives her back to Parikshit but places a heavy curse on her and their future sons, stating, "Since thou hast deceived many kings, thy offspring will prove disrespectful to Brahmanas." This curse is absolutely crucial. It basically sets a ticking time bomb for the king's entire bloodline.
Decades pass, Parikshit retires, and his eldest son Sala takes the throne, ushering us right into Act 2, the stolen magical steeds. Just like his dad, King Sala is out hunting, and he finds a deer he simply cannot catch. It's too fast. His charioteer is terrified to even bring it up, but under threat of death, he reveals that there are these legendary Flenti or Vameja horses. They belong to the Brahmana sage Vamadeva. They are fleet as the mind, and they're literally the only animals capable of catching this impossible prey. So Sala visits the sage, borrows the horses with a strict promise to return them, catches his deer, and takes the steeds back to his capital. And here is where the cultural clash predicted by the Frog King's curse actually happens. King Sala arrogantly locks the horses up in the palace. When the sage's disciple, Atriya, comes to collect them a month later, Sala boldly declares that the finest jewels and steeds rightfully belong only to kings, the Kshatriyas. He's basically saying, what business do Brahmanas have with horses anyway? Sage Vamadeva, however, maintains his rightful ownership, pointing out that by breaking these ancient rules, the king is actively inviting death.
This blatant, prideful disrespect inevitably forces our story into Act 3, the sage's deadly wrath.
Sage Vamadeva arrives at the palace in person to demand his steeds back. He reminds the king of his promise. But Sala is completely blinded by his own arrogance and actually mocks him. He says, Let 4 asses carry thee, or 4 mules. This pair of Vami horses, however, deserves to be owned by Kshatriyas. He is literally telling a deeply powerful magical sage to go ride a mule while stealing his property. No way that ends well.
The sage warns him that terrible vows are ordained for Brahmanas, but Sala won't budge. So Vamadeva doesn't hesitate. He summons Rakshasas. These are fierce, mighty demons with terrifying faces and literal iron bodies. Vamadeva commands these 4 iron-bodied horrors to pursue the king, impale him on sharp lances, and cut his body into 4 parts.
And the tragedy unfolds at breakneck speed. Talk about a domino effect. First, Sala cries out that he'll never yield, and the Rakshasas instantly slay him. Next, his people immediately install his brother Dala on the throne. Vamadeva turns to the new king and demands the horses. But Dala, he grabs a poison-tempered arrow, fully intending to tear the sage apart. But Vamadeva just uses his magic, proclaiming that Dala will instead shoot his own dear 10-year-old son. Magically compelled, Dala releases the arrow and commits a devastating accidental filicide right there in the palace. It's incredibly dark.
Dala's arms are then paralyzed by the sage's magic, forcing him to finally admit defeat. And that brings us to the finale. A queen saves the kingdom.
Vamadeva instructs the king to touch his queen with the arrow to purge his massive sin. And this is where the queen wisely and humbly steps in. She doesn't fight the sage, she honors him. She says, "O Holy One, let my husband may now be freed from his sin. This is the boon that I ask, O thou foremost of Brahmanas." She basically begs for her husband's redemption and the kingdom's safety. Hearing her respectful words, the sage finally relents. King Dala, who is deeply relieved, bows down with reverence and, at long last, returns the magical horses.
This incredible story Markandeya tells leaves us with such a profound realization about the ancient world's hierarchy. It really brings us to one final provocative question. In the ancient world, who truly held the power? Was it the king with the sword or the sage with the word? As this epic tragedy so brilliantly captures, the crown might rule the physical land, but it's the ascetic sage who commands the forces of life, death, and magic itself. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and always keep questioning the hidden power dynamics in the stories we tell.